Now that you know about the heart and its functions and how blood travels through the body and arteries and veins and capillaries, now we're going to actually talk about the fluid that flows through that system. We're going to talk about blood. So let's talk about blood in terms of functions. Blood is a connective tissue, meaning it pieces together various parts of the body. It is one of two types of fluid connective tissue, meaning it's fluid or has flow to it. The other kind is lymph, but we're not going to get into the lymphatic system, so we're only going to talk about blood. Some of the functions that blood provides, and you're going to be surprised at how long this list actually is, but one of the major things it does is it transports dissolved gases, which you already know about, such as oxygen and carbon dioxide. It delivers nutrients. These are things like fats, proteins, nucleic acids, all of these things throughout the body. It distributes hormones to all the different cells, hormones such as adrenaline, estrogen, progesterone, all of these various things, growth hormone. And you also have metabolic waste. These can be anything from carbon dioxide is a metabolic waste. You also have things from the breakdown of DNA. You also have uric acid, which is part of a breakdown of DNA, which is distributed throughout blood and gotten rid of in urine through the kidneys. So tons of things that it transports throughout the body, the good and the bad. If you take a look at a red blood cell, which would be one of the transport carrying cells, you will notice that hemoglobin is the major functioning protein that carries oxygen and carbon dioxide throughout the body. Keep in mind though, red blood cells aren't the only transporter. You're going to have other things that are going to aid in that. It regulates the pH and the electrolyte composition of interstitial fluid of the body. Basically, what it does is it makes sure that the level of acidity, or how basic the fluid outside of your cells is, that it actually maintains within a certain range. Ideally, the pH of blood is about 7.4, so it is slightly basic. What blood also does, then, since it regulates that pH, it actually works as a buffer. If it gets too acidic, blood has the ability to bring it back down. If it gets too basic, blood has the ability to bring it back down. So it constantly keeps it around 7.4, because if pH gets a little out of hand, tissue can start to deteriorate. Electrolyte composition, these are your things like your calcium, your potassium, your phosphorus, all of these electrolytes that you hear about that are needed for things like muscle contraction or neurotransmitter, for action potentials, all of those things. That's the electrolyte composition. Look at this. This is just a chart to give you an idea of where blood falls into some of the other common things that you come across throughout your life. Alright, the other thing it does is it restricts fluid loss through a damaged vessel. So if you get anything from as simple as a paper cut to something as big as you have a major cut using, a scalpel, your blood actually has the components necessary to form a temporary patch or a clot that actually causes your blood to stop flowing. So your blood causes itself to stop leaving the body. For example, you have this injury right here, which in fact looks like a razor blade injury, not quite as hardcore as mine. This is just an example of kind of what happens when a blood vessel breaks. You get all these different factors that come into here: platelets, red blood cells, fibrin, which is a protein in the blood, forming that temporary patch or clot for itself to heal. It also carries the defense cells of your body. These are your white blood cells that kind of keep you protected from toxins and pathogens. We're going to get really in-depth into white blood cells. Not, I guess, really in-depth, but in-depth enough to where you're going to have to know that there are specific white blood cells that fight specific types of pathogens or toxins, such as there's one specific kind that attacks viruses, there's one specific kind that attacks bacteria, there's some for allergens, there's all kinds of different things going on here. But their main job is attack foreign material. So what you have here, you have an example of a white blood cell, and these green things here are actually bacteria. So the white blood cell is in fact engulfing or eating bacteria. You remember phagocytosis, which we talked about, which the cell eats it, digests it, breaks it down, and is distributed as waste. You also have the fact that it stabilizes your body temperature. We kind of went over this when we talked about the integumentary system, but blood actually absorbs heat and has the ability to get rid of it. So as the tissues of your body produce heat as a byproduct of chemical reactions such as your muscles and cellular respiration and things like that, what actually happens is the blood absorbs that, transports it, and distributes it to other parts of the body. Your average temperature of your body, 98.6 degrees. The average temperature of your blood, actually 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit. So when we talk about this is the reason why people get that flushed face look to them. So when blood it retains a lot of heat, the blood vessels will dilate, causing them to become closer to the surface of the skin, so they can actually lose heat. So you have this red liquid, kind of gooey substance that flows throughout your body. It's actually not just a red liquid. There's a lot of things inside that liquid. Your blood is actually a suspension, meaning it has a liquid, and then it has such small solid particles floating within it that they are suspended within the liquid. Not dissolved, but suspended. So you take blood that you would notice as this entire red thing, and it's actually called whole blood. Whole blood can be taken and broken down into two different elements. You have the plasma portion, which is actually 55% or the majority of your blood, and then you also have what are called formed elements. These are your things called your red blood cells, your erythrocytes, your white blood cells, leukocytes, and platelets. The proteins that are dissolved in the plasma are equally as important as all the other formed elements themselves.
Mostly of water, but it also contains proteins, sugars, hormones, and salts. The three different types of cells you'll find in plasma are red blood cells, or erythrocytes, white blood cells, or leukocytes, and platelets, or thrombocytes. Red blood cells give the blood its color and make up 40 to 45% of your blood. They're round and look a little like a donut without the hole in the middle. Their main job is to carry oxygen to the other cells of the body and to take away the carbon dioxide as a waste product. Red blood cells only live 4 months, but healthy bone marrow produces 4 to 5 billion red cells every hour to keep replenishing the ones that wear out. White blood cells, on the other hand, are the body's defense system. They all fight infection from bacteria, viruses, all those nasty microbes that can cause disease. Whenever germs begin to infect your body, they send out a signal that the granulocyte recognizes. Just as soon as the granulocyte detects the signal, it begins its journey to the site of the infection. When at last they find the invader germ, they quickly move in for the kill, first attacking the invader and then eating it. Something else that is truly amazing is how the platelets work. Platelets are small pieces of cell material, or cytoplasm, whose job it is to plug holes in the vessel walls. So, say you're standing inside the blood vessel and looking at the tear in its wall. You'd see millions of platelets responding to the injury, throwing themselves over the cut. They stick to the wound's edges and to each other to form a plug that slows the loss of blood within 3 to 5 minutes. A platelet plug will last for only 24 to 72 hours because the platelets run out of energy and begin to fall apart. But as long as there is still an unhealed hole in the blood vessel wall, the clot will continue being formed, dissolved, and reformed to stop and prevent more bleeding from occurring. When the wound is completely healed by the new cells growing over it, the clot will be cleared away and blood will begin to flow through the vessel normally.
Oh, so what you have there is essentially just a summary or an intro onto all the different parts of your blood. So let's continue with our PowerPoint here. So if you want a graphic image of your blood, anything that's yellow in this picture is going to represent your plasma. Obviously the red blood cells that look like donuts without the hole are going to be your red blood cells. Your white blood cells are at least twice as large as red blood cells, typically with a bluish, purplish, reddish tint to the inside or the nucleus. If you notice, red blood cells have no nucleus, something to keep in mind. Platelets are going to be smaller than red blood cells, and proteins and things like that you're not going to be able to see. If you take your blood, and whole blood, and if you wanted to be able to see all the different components of it, you actually can take that blood, since it's a suspension, and run it through a centrifuge and spin it over and over and over and over again, repeatedly over and over and over and over again. What happens is all the formed elements end up getting thrown down to the end of the test tube, and the plasma is left at the top. So your blood actually has the yellow colored plasma, a small amount of white blood cells and platelets, and then red blood cells themselves. I always get the question, well, how much blood do I have, and how much can I lose, and things like that. And it was always a common question during our blood drive, but that's why they have qualifiers that either eliminate you or allow you to donate blood. The amount of blood can range from 4 to 6 liters depending on gender and size of the individual. So when you went to donate blood, if they told you, sorry, you can't donate blood, most likely the reason being is because you don't exactly have that much to give, and what you have is rather important to you in terms of your size. Other disqualifying factors such as heart rate, fever, and things like that, obviously they don't want infections distributed throughout the blood, so there's the reason. Whole blood, like I said, can actually be separated into the different elements and drawn out of the body in one of two ways. You can either draw blood venous or arterial. The least common in human beings is going to be arterial. Anytime you've had blood drawn, it's most likely going to be venous blood. It's going to have that really dark red color to it. Arterial blood, really bright red. And here's how they draw your blood. Now, one of the main reasons I chose that, besides the fact that you're actually getting to witness venous blood being drawn from the body, is the fact that I have no idea what the guy that made that video decided to put some hardcore guitar riff in there in the background, because that's appropriate when you're getting your blood drawn. Real blood, when centrifuged and separated, looks like this. Venous blood. So, I think that's where we're going to stop for now before we get into the specifics of each of the components. If you have any questions, let me know.